I never thought the thing that would break me was the sound of laughter. 2 years ago, at my lowest, I had gone to the people who were supposed to be closest to me, my mother, my father, my brother. Before we continue, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next update. And confessed that I needed help. I had been married for 7 years. The marriage ended ugly and unexpectedly. Infidelity, gaslighting, a slow evaporation of the person I had been. I left the house with a suitcase, a battered laptop, and a dog that liked to sleep under the radiator. I expected pity, maybe a loan, maybe a place to stay for a few weeks. I did not expect the coldness that greeted me. "Get yourself together," my brother said on the phone, laughing in a way that sounded like a cough. "You always get into drama." My mother told me I had to take responsibility for my choices. "We raised you to be independent," she said, like it was a compliment any parent would be proud of while they watched you fall. My father, who had always offered practical advice like he was dispensing screws from a hardware store, said, "Maybe this is good for you. Learn to stand on your own." They told these things kindly. Sometimes. They told them in front of other relatives who later repeated the lines like gospel. The worst was the way the laughter slid in afterward. The whisper of, "She always overreacts," or "She'll be fine, she's dramatic." It cut because I needed them, and they refused the thing I needed most. To be seen not as a sermon, not as a lesson, but as a human with a fresh, burning wound. For the first 6 months, I slept on my friend Rosa's couch and lived off instant noodles and the kindness of strangers. I worked 2 jobs, a remote customer support gig and evenings as a barista, because I wanted to be financially independent. But it wasn't just the money that I lost. It was my sense of safety. I learned how precarious everything was. Friendships, housing, my own self-worth. I called my mother once, after a week of pure panic, and she said, "Why didn't you just try to fix it?" As if fixing a human heart were a weekend project. When I hung up, I sat on the kitchen floor and let the world blur into a watercolor of shame and an empty bank account. It gets worse. My father, the man who would criticize my job choices at the dinner table, stood in my ex's condo when the keys were returned and said, "Well, at least you learned something." He meant it as consolation, but it looked like victory. He who had half-joked about boyfriends and women's nonsense now regarded my marital collapse almost proudly, as though we'd minted a lesson to collect interest on. My brother posted a vague Instagram story about bad choices with a picture of a highway, and half the family reacted with heart emojis, as if this were an event to mark with social currency. I know how that sounds. It reads cold. But imagine being a grown person with no safety net, not only no money, but the sense that the only people who should have been your refuge had chosen not to be. Imagine trying to keep your dignity while the people who are supposed to love you best snickered behind their hands, then paraded their performance of concern to others like a badge. So I did what people like me often do. I made a plan. The word revenge makes people picture dramatic court scenes, ruined reputations, or humiliating public exposures. But my revenge was quiet. It was methodical. It was a long, slow reweaving of myself. I wanted something more lasting than a satisfying one-off. I wanted to change the weather in which my family lived. I started small. I took better care of my mental health. I went to therapy until I could sit with my feelings without being flattened by them. I paid my bills on time. I kept my jobs and added a third freelance thing. I learned the little secrets of digital marketing because a friend needed help, and they paid me to run a small campaign. I had not come from money. My parents had taught me to pick my own path, then laughed when I took one that required real work. I would not fall back into coin-operated pity. Year 1 was survival. Year 2 was learning, spreadsheets, saving, LinkedIn posts that grew into clients. Year 3, I moved into a small studio that had sunlight and a windowsill my cat liked. I reclaimed more than a place to live. I reclaimed my voice. I kept my family at arm's length. Not out of spite, at least not at first, but because I needed to build before I could be seen. I answered their calls less. When I did answer, I spoke in short, polite bursts, not giving them the rawness any longer. If they wanted to be in my life, they would come closer without the laughter. Most of the time, they didn't. 6 months in, I got a wedding invitation to my cousin's party. They mailed it a physical card, white edges, embossed script. I RSVP'd. No. My brother texted, "Why? Mom's offended." I replied, "I'm working that weekend." He sniffed at that. Convenience allows people to believe whatever they want. My mother called and cried about how I was pulling away, and I let her. I let her cry while I made soup and put my headphones on and reminded myself that kindness isn't weakness. People ask me what the turning point was, the moment that turned me from damage into someone steady. There wasn't one. It was 1,000 things. Passing a savings goal, closing a big contract, hearing my therapist say, "You're not your past, you're your integrity." But if I had to choose a symbolic day, it was the night I closed my laptop after finishing a proposal for a client who paid me more than I'd earned in a month years ago. I sat in my small living room and cried, because the tears were not from despair, but from the relief of not being owned by anyone's pity. I rebuilt piece by piece, friendships that were reciprocal, work that respected my time, an apartment that I could call mine. I traveled, slowly and cheaply, in the beginning bus rides to seaside towns, sleeping in hostels and eating street food. Travel fixed something in me. It taught me to navigate spaces that are indifferent and often kind. And it taught me that survival can be an artful thing. Somewhere along the way, people took notice. Old friends came back. Former colleagues recommended me. The 3 freelance streams turned into a single, respectable small business running marketing for local shops and nonprofits. I hired a part-time assistant, a young woman who wrote with clarity I envied. We became an improbable, quiet team. 2 years turned into 3. My mother called more often, but she never asked to move in or demanded I pay for something. My father sent a Christmas check. I returned half because I did not want to be the thing that kept their holidays feeling complete. My brother started a family. I sent a baby gift and a card and waited to see if he would too change. Then, 6 years after the divorce, there was a knock. It was a Tuesday. I was alone in my apartment eating a bowl of stir-fry I'd made from a recipe scavenged online. My door buzzed, then rattled a persistent, urgent sound. The sort of knock that suggests someone who believes they have a right to enter. My cat hid under the couch and stared. I opened the door. My mother was there first. Her hair was thinner. There were new lines around her mouth. She had on a coat I knew by sight, an old thing that had lost its color but not its posture. My father stood behind her, smaller than I remembered. And my brother, his face was sheepish. Apologetic, he held a cardboard box. They stood in the hall, framed by morning light, and I had the strangest sensation of watching them as if through a window in someone else's life. "Hi," my mother said, voice bright but brittle. "Do you have a minute?" I stepped aside. "Come in." They shuffled into the small living room. My houseplants looked at them like new guests. My assistant, passing by to drop off a file, gave me a look. I waved her away. This would be private. Then they started to talk, in the manner of people rehearsing lines. "We need help," my mother said. "We messed up." It was awkward, surprising and honest, in a way I had not believed they could be. My father, who hadn't slowed down his practical talk even in his youth, said, "We sold the house." He looked at the ceiling as if apology should be read from it. "The market was bad, and we made some decisions that..." He paused. He was not good at excuses. My brother set the box on the coffee table and opened it. Inside were medical papers and overdue notices. His hands shook a little. "Dad had a heart thing," he said. "The operation went fine. But the bills? Mom's not well either. She has something with her thyroid. The insurance won't cover all of it. He looked at me like I was the person who could solve all arithmetic with a smile. They expected me to cry, to forgive, to write a check that would fold all their mistakes into one neat, invisible bandage. I felt the old, familiar hunger, the one that had made me run to them years ago. The part of me that yearned to be the person who could save things. Except this time, I was different. I had spent 6 years unlearning the reflex to collapse under other people's needs. 6 years had taught me that self-preservation sometimes means saying no to the people who taught you how to ask. I made tea for all of us, because manners matter. We sat. There was a silence that more than ever felt like a chasm. My mother's eyes filled. "Oh, honey, we're so sorry," she said. "We were selfish. We didn't help you when you needed it." When she said it that way, it sounded like a child covering their tracks. "Why are you here?" I asked simply. "We need money," my brother said. "We're embarrassed. We tried loans, credit. Dad thought it would be fine." He swallowed. "Why me?" I asked. My mother hesitated. Then she spoke the sentence that used to be my anthem and had been a weapon before. "Because you do well." That line, "because you do well," had once been an accusation disguised as praise. It was the family's most persuasive argument for expropriating my life. When they had said it years ago, it had punctured me like a title deed. Today I realized something. For 6 years, I had been making them wrong gently, persistently. I had rebuilt my house of self, where their expectation could not enter without invitation. I looked at the documents my brother had dumped on the table. Hospital bills, notices of foreclosure, an invoice for a specialist. The numbers were ugly. I could, in a moment, wipe them clean from their lives. I could, with a keystroke into my bank, erase the panic from their faces. For a tiny second, the old me, the one who had been laughingly called generous, rose up. But revenge is not always about money. Sometimes it is about teaching. Sometimes it is about withholding, not out of malice, but as a lesson they have refused to learn. "You want me to bail you out?" I said. My father nodded miserably. I looked at them. They looked like sheep that had wandered onto thin ice. I felt anger rise. But beneath it was a different current, grief. I grieved that my family had been so slow to see the value in being present. "Do you remember what you said to me?" I asked. Silence. "You laughed," I said. "Not to be cruel, you protest. You say you were practical. But you laughed when I told you I was broken. You trained yourselves to believe that my problems were entertainment, a drama to be recited at the next family dinner. When I needed help, you turned me into a cautionary tale." My mother's face crumpled, the way cloth does when put into a fist. "We didn't mean," she began. "You never mean," I said. "That's part of the problem. We didn't mean has cleared every shelf of accountability in this family. You have to mean it, actions, not words. There is a way people listen when they finally understand they have been wrong. It is an intake, like the bank of a storm. It was a small, beautiful thing to watch them take that breath. I told them how it had been. The couch sleeping, the ramen, the nights I called and got platitudes. I told them about the nights when the panic felt like a physical thing, and I would pinch my arm to know I was alive. I told them how I learned to sleep without being owned by anyone else's indifference. My brother put his head in his hands. "I thought you were being dramatic. I thought you wanted attention." He looked up, humiliated. "I'm so sorry. What do you need from me?" I asked finally. "My God, anything," my mother said. "Please." There was a temptation to lecture, to make them do penance. I could have told them to sell anything they owned to pay off their debt, then made them work for me in ways that taught them humility. But meanness would have been too easy a victory. I wanted them to feel the slow work of re-understanding me, to reform the cords that connect our family. So I made 3 conditions. 1, I would not erase their debt on command. I would not be the bank that pays to keep avoidance alive. I would offer to help with the most urgent bills, the medical bills that would ruin them, but only if they agreed to a plan. 2, they would get financial counseling. My brother, in particular, needed to understand budgeting. My parents needed to know what financial planning actually was. I had lived on a budget for long enough to know that money without literacy is a barn door left unlocked. 3, they would attend therapy. Not a single session, not a sermon in the living room. I wanted sustained counseling, family therapy, at least 12 sessions, because the laughter that hurt me was not about a single incident. It was a pattern. Patterns repeat if untreated. I watched them process the conditions. My mother's face hardened in an odd way. "Are you saying we can't just accept help?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm saying if you want my help, you have to do the hard work that might prevent this from happening again. I'm not your charity. I'm your daughter." My father, who had said, "Learn to stand on your own once upon a time," looked at me as if I had grown tall as a wall. "Do we have a choice?" he asked. "You always have a choice. It just might come with consequences." They agreed, not because I demanded it with fury, but because the alternative, me turning away entirely, was too stark. If I said no, I knew my mother might set herself to die from worry in a way that would unbalance the rest of the family. I was willing to help, but on different terms. We drew the plan out together. I met with a financial advisor, someone I trusted, and we worked out a practical schedule for bills. My father took a class about basic money management at the community college. My brother started a job that wasn't his fun project, but a real, steady role. My mother began therapy with a counselor who asked questions instead of giving platitudes. It was not fast. It was not theatrical. It was slow and humble. Sometimes it was humiliating for them. Sometimes it was exhausting for me. But out of that effort grew something I had not expected. After a year, their gratitude was real, in the quiet way that does not need to be performative. My mother would call and say, "I balanced the checkbook today. Look." It felt like watching a person find a new language. My father started cooking for himself. My brother stopped treating his finances like a cop-out. Here's the part some people won't like. I forgave them, not because they deserved it. They didn't earn it at first. They had to demonstrate that they could change the pattern. But human beings are capable of growth, and I wanted to be a person who could offer the possibility of repair without allowing repair to erase accountability. I let myself feel the righteous satisfaction of my own boundaries holding. 6 years after my divorce, when they knocked on my door, expecting the worn-out child, they found someone who had been softened and toughened by time. I did not relish their humiliation. I relished my own survival. I did not savor seeing them squirm. But I did savor the fact that they had to relearn how to love someone without currency attached. Sometimes vengeance is binary, a check, a takedown. Sometimes it's the slow, patient work of becoming the person who does not disappear when called upon. My revenge was that I refused to be a casualty of their indifference and made a life that could not be bought. The laughter that had once punctured me became a background noise, no longer the weather in which I arranged my existence. Now, when I answer their calls, there is a realness there. There are apologies that are small and proud, and sometimes a too late self-awareness. We eat together on Sundays, sometimes, not every week, but often enough that my niece knows my laugh. My father asks my opinion on small things and listens. My brother texts me spreadsheets with his tax questions and no longer needs my rescue. My mother has stopped saying because you do well is a demand and says it as a proud, honest sentiment instead. It's imperfect, but it's work. If you're reading this and your family laughed when you needed them, I see you. I was once you. The feeling is a hollow, a dangerous gravity. You might think you need to punish them. You might want dramatic revenge. I understand that impulse. But what worked for me was rebuilding myself so fully that their decision to be small could not make me small in return. When they knocked, 6 years after the laughter, I opened the door and let them in. I saw their surprise when I wasn't a ruined creature. I didn't gloat, I taught. I didn't close the door, I set conditions. In doing so, I took back something bigger than money. I took back my worth, and sometimes that's the kindest revenge there is.